Mark Sterling looked at his wife, Elena, with pure pity. In his eyes, she was a simple housewife who wore thrift store cardigans and clipped coupons, a dead weight dragging down his rising career at the prestigious global firm, Vance & Co. He thought he was the provider. He thought he was the power player. So, on a rainy Tuesday, he handed her an ultimatum and kicked her out of the house to make room for a new life. What Mark didn't know was that the signature he was desperate to get for his promotion didn't belong to his boss. It belonged to the woman he just evicted. Mark was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. Never underestimate the quiet ones. The rain battered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor of the Aurelius building in downtown Chicago. Mark Sterling adjusted his silk tie, catching his reflection in the glass. He liked what he saw. 32 years old, a jawline that could cut glass, and the position of Senior Director of Operations within arm's reach. He wasn't just an employee, he was a rising star at Vance & Co., a private equity conglomerate known for swallowing smaller companies whole. The only thing missing was the final seal of approval from the board, specifically the mysterious majority shareholder known only as the chairman, who hadn't been seen in public since the founding father, old man Silas Vance, passed away 3 years ago. "You look tense, Mark," a voice purred from the doorway. Mark turned. It was Jessica Thorne. She was everything Mark thought he wanted, ambitious, sharp, and dressed in a tailored crimson dress that cost more than Mark's first car. Jessica was the VP of marketing, and for the last 6 months, she had been Mark's work wife, a title that was rapidly losing the work prefix. "Just the quarterly gala," Mark sighed, walking back to his mahogany desk. "Henderson tells me the chairman might actually make an appearance this year. If I get the promotion to partner, I need to look the part. My life needs to be flawless." Jessica walked over, resting a manicured hand on his shoulder. "Your life is flawless, Mark, except for one small, frumpy detail waiting for you in the suburbs." Mark flinched. He knew exactly who she meant. Elena. Elena Sterling, his wife of 5 years. When they met, Mark was a junior analyst drowning in student debt, and Eleanor was a quiet librarian who volunteered at the animal shelter. She was sweet, unassuming, and incredibly frugal. She supported him when he had nothing, cooking simple meals and mending his shirts. But now Mark made 6 figures. He drove a Porsche. He wanted to vacation in Saint-Tropez, not camp in Wisconsin. Elena hadn't changed, and that was the problem. She's loyal," Mark said, though the defense sounded weak even to his own ears. "Loyalty doesn't look good on a magazine cover, Mark," Jessica whispered, leaning in close. "If you make partner, you'll be dining with senators and oil tycoons. Do you really want to bring a woman who thinks Olive Garden is fine, dining to a table with the Rockefellers? She doesn't fit your narrative anymore." Mark drove home that night in silence. The words echoed in his head. "She doesn't fit your narrative." When he pulled into the driveway of their modest 3-bedroom home, the lights were on. He walked inside, shaking off the rain. The house smelled like rosemary and roasted chicken. It was cozy, clean, and utterly suffocating. Elena came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a worn apron. She was beautiful in a natural, understated way. No makeup, messy bun, soft eyes, but Mark couldn't see it. He only saw the lack of polish. "Hey," she said softly, smiling. "I made your favorite. Roast chicken with the lemon herb glaze. How was work?" "Fine," Mark grunted, loosening his tie and ignoring her attempt to kiss his cheek. He walked straight to the liquor cabinet and poured a stiff scotch. "Actually, it was brutal. The gala is on Saturday." Elena's face lit up slightly. "Oh, the company party. Do you need me to go this year? I bought a dress, just in case. It was on sale at Macy's." Mark took a long sip, the alcohol burning his throat. He looked at her, hopeful, sweet Elena. Then he pictured Jessica in her crimson designer gown, commanding the room, laughing with the executives. He pictured walking into the ballroom with Eleanor in a discount rack dress, stumbling over small talk about library books. The shame was instant and hot. "No," Mark said, his voice colder than he intended. "It's employees only this year. Strategic meetings. Very high level." It was a lie. A blatant one. Elena's smile faltered, but she nodded quickly, retreating into her shell. "Oh, I understand. Well, dinner is ready." They ate in silence. Mark picked at the chicken. It was delicious, which somehow made him angrier. Why was she so content with this small life? Why didn't she want more? "I saw a charge on the credit card," Mark said suddenly, cutting through the silence. $200. Art supplies. Elena looked down. "Yes. I've been painting again. I thought maybe I could try to sell some online." Mark laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Elena, be realistic. We have bills. We have a mortgage. I'm out there killing myself to make partner, and you're playing with watercolors. You need to grow up." "I paid for it with my own money," Elena said quietly. "From the library stipend." "It's our money, Elena. It's barely peanuts compared to what I bring in. I'm carrying this entire life on my back." Elena put her fork down. Her eyes, usually soft, hardened just a fraction. "Is that what you think? That you're carrying me?" "Look around," Mark gestured at the walls. "I pay the mortgage. I pay for the car. I pay for the food on this table. What do you contribute, Elena? Comfort. Comfort doesn't buy a seat at the table at Vance & Co." He expected her to cry. She usually cried when he got like this. But tonight, she just stared at him, a strange, unreadable expression on her face. It looked almost like disappointment. "You're right, Mark," she said, standing up and clearing her plate. "Money is very important to you right now." "It's not about money," he snapped. "It's about ambition. It's about being someone." "I thought you were someone when you were a junior analyst," she whispered. Mark slammed his hand on the table. "I'm going to bed." He left her in the kitchen. As he stormed upstairs, his phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. "Mr. Henderson just confirmed. The chairman is looking for a family man to promote, but the right kind of family. We need to talk." Mark stared at the screen. The right kind of family. He looked at the wedding photo on the hallway wall. He and Eleanor, 5 years ago. He looked happy then. But happiness was for poor people. Mark wanted power, and he knew exactly what he had to do to get it. 3 days passed. The tension in the Sterling household was thick enough to choke on. Mark spent every evening working late, or telling Elena he was working late. In reality, he was at the upscale bistro Le Bernardin with Jessica, plotting his ascent. "It's simple," Jessica said, over a glass of vintage Pinot Noir. "Henderson loves me. He respects you. If we were a power couple, we'd be unstoppable. The board wants stability, but they also want glamour. Elena she's a nice girl, Mark, but she's an anchor. You're a yacht." Mark nodded, intoxicated by the flattery and the wine. "She doesn't get it. She thinks painting in the garage is a career." "I spoke to legal," Jessica said, casually, sliding a manila envelope across the white tablecloth. "My friend at Goldman & Weiss drew these up. Just as a draft, standard separation agreement. You keep the house, the car, the accounts. She gets a small settlement. It's generous, considering she brought 0 assets into the marriage." Mark stared at the envelope. It felt heavy. Divorce? Liberation, Jessica corrected. Imagine walking into the gala on Saturday night, hand in hand with me, the future CEO and his equal. No baggage. Mark took the envelope. Friday evening arrived. The rain had stopped, leaving the Chicago streets slick and grey. Mark came home early, his heart pounding against his ribs like a sledgehammer. He found Elena in the living room. She wasn't painting or reading. She was sitting on the sofa, looking at a photo album. She looked up as he entered. She looked tired. "We need to talk," Mark said, skipping the pleasantries. He didn't want to lose his nerve. Elena closed the album. "Yes, I think we do." Mark paced the room, his hands shaking slightly. "Elena, I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us. About my future. And I don't think our paths are aligned anymore," Mark said, rehearsing the lines Jessica had fed him. "I'm evolving. I'm moving into a world that requires a certain level of engagement. A certain image." "Image," Elena repeated flatly. "Yes, image," Mark snapped, his guilt manifesting as anger. "It matters. I can't be the partner at $1 billion firm and come home to this." He gestured vaguely at her, at the cozy room, at the life they had built. "I need someone who pushes me, someone who understands the stakes." "And you think I don't?" Elena asked, standing up. She wasn't shouting. Her voice was deadly calm. "You're happy being a librarian, Elena. You're happy with coupons and leftovers. That's fine for you, but it's suffocating me." Mark pulled the envelope from his briefcase and slammed it on the coffee table. "I want a divorce." The silence that followed was deafening. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked loudly. Elena looked at the envelope, then back at Mark. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply took a deep breath. "You want me to leave?" she asked. "I think it's best," Mark said, puffing his chest out. "I'm willing to give you a settlement. $10,000. It's more than fair. You can go stay with your sister in Ohio until you get on your feet." $10,000, Elena said, a dry, humorless chuckle escaping her lips. "For 5 years of my life." "It's business, Elena. Don't make it emotional." Elena walked over to the window, looking out at the driveway where Mark's Porsche was parked. "You know, Mark, when we met, you told me you wanted to build something real. You said you hated the fake smiles of the corporate world. People change. I grew up." "No." Elena turned to face him, her eyes piercing. "You didn't grow up. You sold out. There's a difference." "I want you out by tomorrow morning," Mark said, his voice hard. "The gala is Saturday night. I want this done before then. I don't want to come home and find you here." Eleanor stared at him for a long, uncomfortable moment. It felt like she was looking right through his skin, analyzing the rot beneath. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said. Mark blinked. "Okay? If that's what you want, Mark, I'll go." She walked to the table and picked up the papers. She didn't even read them. She just looked at the signature line. "But I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that you chose this. You chose to kick me out." "I'm making a strategic decision for my life," Mark scoffed. Elena walked to the stairs. "I'll pack my things. I won't take much. Just my clothes and my painting supplies. You can keep the furniture. You can keep the house." She paused on the first step. "You're going to need them more than I will." Mark felt a surge of triumph mixed with confusion. It was too easy. Why wasn't she fighting? "Good," he called after her. "Leave the keys on the counter." By noon the next day, she was gone. The house was silent. The closet was half empty. Mark walked through the rooms, feeling a sense of giddy freedom. He was alone. He was unburdened. He called Jessica. "It's done. She's gone." Perfect, Jessica purred. Get your tuxedo ready, darling. Tonight, we conquer the world. Mark hung up and looked at himself in the mirror. He looked like a winner. He had no idea that he had just fired the owner of the company he worked for. As he was getting dressed, he noticed something on the kitchen counter. Elena had left her keys just as he asked, but underneath them was a small note. Mark, I hope you find what you're looking for. But be careful what you wish for at the gala tonight. The chairman has a very strict policy on loyalty. Mark crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. Bitter, he muttered. Just bitter. He adjusted his cufflinks, grabbed his phone, and walked out the door, ready to meet his destiny. He didn't know he was walking straight into a guillotine. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel was a cavern of gold leaf, crystal chandeliers, and the distinct, crisp scent of old money. It was the kind of room where the air conditioning felt expensive. Mark Sterling stepped onto the plush red carpet, adjusting his onyx cufflinks for the 10th time. Beside him, Jessica Thorne was a vision of calculated perfection. Her crimson dress, a custom Vera Wang, hugged her curves like a second skin, slashed aggressively up the thigh. Diamonds dripped from her ears, borrowed, Mark knew, but they looked real enough to fool the casual observer. Chin up, darling, Jessica whispered, her arm looped through his, her nails digging slightly into his bicep. You're walking like an employee. Walk like an owner. Mark forced a smile, his chest puffing out. He scanned the room. It was a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. The titans of Chicago's business world were here. There was Julian Banks, the hedge fund manager who had shorted the housing market and won. There was Senator Corcoran, laughing loudly near the ice sculpture of the Vance & Co. logo. This is it, Mark breathed, the adrenaline finally overriding the strange, hollow feeling in his gut that had lingered since he watched Elena drive away. This is where I belong. Exactly, Jessica purred. And look who's holding court near the bar. She nodded toward a cluster of men in grey suits surrounding a tall, imposing figure with silver hair. Arthur Henderson, the CEO of Vance & Co., the man who held the keys to the partner promotion. Let's go, Mark said, steering Jessica toward the group. As they approached, the conversation died down. Henderson turned, his steel-grey eyes landing on Mark. For a second, Mark thought he saw a flicker of confusion, maybe even disapproval, cross the CEO's face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a polite, practiced smile. Mark, Henderson said, extending a hand. And Ms. Thorne. You both look distinct tonight. Mr. Henderson, Mark said, gripping the older man's hand firmly. An incredible turnout. The buzz about the chairman's appearance has everyone on edge. Indeed, Henderson said, taking a sip of his sparkling water. The chairman values presence and authenticity. He paused, looking over Mark's shoulder. I don't see Mrs. Sterling. Elena, wasn't it? I recall meeting her at the company picnic 2 years ago. Charming woman. Brought homemade brownies. Mark felt a bead of sweat trickle down his back. He hadn't expected Henderson to remember Elena. She was a ghost in his corporate life. Elena couldn't make it, Mark lied smoothly, the rehearsal with Jessica paying off. We've actually decided to separate, amicably, of course. We found that our lives were moving in different directions. Jessica chimed in, her voice like velvet. Mark is incredibly dedicated, Arthur. Sometimes that level of ambition requires a partner who understands the sacrifices of this world. Not everyone is cut out for the climb. Henderson stared at them. The silence stretched a beat too long. He didn't nod. He didn't offer condolences. He just looked at Mark with an expression that was hard to read. part pity, part scrutiny. Different directions, Henderson repeated slowly. Interesting choice of words. Well, I suppose tonight will be full of surprises for everyone. He turned back to the other executives, effectively dismissing Mark and Jessica. Mark steered Jessica away, grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. That was weird. Did he seem cold to you? He's a CEO, Mark. They don't do warm and fuzzy, Jessica scoffed, checking her reflection in a spoon. He's probably just stressed about the chairman. Rumor has it the old man, or whoever it is going to clean house. Shake up the board. That's good for us. Chaos is a ladder. They spent the next hour working the room. Mark felt the high of social climbing. He laughed at jokes he didn't find funny. He agreed with political opinions he didn't hold. He was playing the game, and he was winning. Every handshake felt like a step away from the small, stifling life he had with Eleanor, and a step toward the penthouse, the yacht, the power. He forgot about the empty house. He forgot about the painting supplies in the garage. He forgot about the woman who had loved him when he was a nobody. At 9 p.m., the lights in the ballroom dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd of 500. A spotlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty stage at the front of the room. The orchestra stopped playing. The air grew thick with anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice boomed over the speakers. "Please take your seats." Mark and Jessica found their table. Table 4, near the front, a prime spot. Mark checked the place cards. Mark Sterling, Jessica Thorne. "We made the inner circle," Jessica whispered, squeezing his hand under the table. "Table 4 is for potential partners." Mark's heart hammered. This was it, the announcement. Arthur Henderson walked onto the stage. He looked smaller up there, under the harsh lights. He adjusted the microphone, his face solemn. "Welcome, friends, colleagues, and esteemed guests," Henderson began. "For 3 years, since the passing of our founder, Silas Vance, this company has been guided by a silent hand, a majority shareholder who has watched us grow, watched us stumble, and watched us succeed. Many of you have speculated about the identity of the chairman." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. "Some thought it was a foreign investor," Henderson continued. "Some thought it was a trust fund committee. But the truth is much simpler. Vance & Co. has always been a family business, and tonight the family has come home." Mark leaned forward. "Family?" he whispered to Jessica. "I thought Silas didn't have any children." "He had a son who died young," Jessica whispered back, frowning. "Maybe a secret nephew?" "Tonight," Henderson said, his voice gaining strength, "we enter a new era, an era of transparency, an era where we remember who we are and what we stand for. It is my distinct honor to introduce you to the owner of Vance & Co. and the chairwoman of the board." He paused for dramatic effect. Mark held his breath. "Ms. Elena Vance." The doors at the back of the stage swung open. The applause was polite at first, the kind of applause corporate crowds give when they are unsure of who they are clapping for. Then, a figure stepped into the spotlight. She was wearing an emerald green gown that shimmered like liquid money. It was elegant, structural, and commanded attention without screaming for it. Her hair, usually messy and tied up in a clip, was cascading in sleek, dark waves over her shoulders. She wore no jewelry except for a simple diamond choker that caught the light with a blinding fire. Mark stopped breathing. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers, hitting the table with a dull thud and spilling golden liquid onto the white tablecloth. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a distant relative. It was Eleanor. His Eleanor. The woman who clipped coupons for laundry detergent. The woman who drove a 2014 Honda Civic. The woman he had kicked out of his house yesterday morning. "No," Mark whispered, the word strangling him. That's not possible." Jessica was frozen beside him. Her mouth was slightly open. Is that your wife?" "It can't be," Mark stammered. "She's broke. She's a librarian. She's—" Eleanor walked to the podium with a grace Mark had never seen, or maybe he had never looked closely enough to see it. She stood tall, radiating a terrifying calmness. She gripped the sides of the podium and looked out at the sea of faces. Her eyes scanned the room, row by row, table by table. Mark felt the moment her gaze landed on table 4. He felt it like a physical blow. She didn't smile, she didn't frown. She just looked at him with that same impenetrable expression she had worn when she signed the divorce papers. Then she looked at Jessica. "Good evening," Elena said. Her voice was amplified, rich and steady. It was the voice he heard every morning, but stripped of the softness he had taken for granted. This was a voice of command. "For those of you who don't know me," she began, "my name is Elena Vance. I chose to live under the name Elena Sterling for the last 5 years." A gasp went through the room. Whispers exploded like wildfire. "I am the granddaughter of Silas Vance," she continued. "When my grandfather passed, he left the company to me. But he left me with a warning. He told me that money acts like a magnifying glass. It shows you who people really are. It reveals the cracks in their character." She paused, letting the words sink in. "So I decided to watch. I decided to live a simple life. I wanted to see if the people running this company and the people in my life valued the work or the reward. I wanted to know if they valued loyalty or status." Mark felt like the room was spinning. He wanted to run, but his legs were led. "I have learned a great deal," Elena said, her eyes drifting back to Mark. "I have seen brilliance in this company. I have seen hard work from our junior analysts and our support staff. But I have also seen a rot at the top, a culture of arrogance, a culture where people are treated as disposable stepping stones." She picked up a glass of water and took a sip. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. "There are men in this room," Elena said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous, "who believe that a partner is an accessory, who believe that ambition is a valid excuse for cruelty, who would throw away years of devotion for a chance to sit at the high table." Jessica was trembling now. She grabbed her clutch. "Mark," she hissed, "we have to go, now." "Sit down," Mark snapped, unable to look away from the stage. He was paralyzed by a horrific fascination. "I am taking over active management of Vance & Co. starting tomorrow," Elena announced, "and there will be changes. We are going to return to the values Silas Vance built this empire on. Integrity, humility, and above all, loyalty." She smiled then, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Enjoy the dinner. I look forward to meeting each of you personally." She stepped back from the podium. The applause this time was thunderous, fueled by shock and the desperate need to please the new monarch. Mark sat in the deafening noise, his world collapsing. "She's a Vance," Jessica whispered, her face pale under her makeup. "You idiot! You absolute moron! You were married to the heiress of the entire fortune, and you didn't know?" "She never told me," Mark said, his voice cracking. "She said her parents were teachers. She said—" "She was testing you," Jessica hissed, her veneer of sophistication cracking to reveal the panic underneath. "She was testing you, and you failed. You failed so hard you dragged me down with you." "We have to fix this," Mark said, standing up on shaky legs. "I can fix this. She loved me. She was my wife for 5 years. She's hurt. It's a performance. Sit down, you fool. Jessica grabbed his arm. Don't make a scene. But Mark pulled away. He was delusional with panic. He convinced himself in that split second that he could talk his way out of it. He was a salesman, wasn't he? He could sell ice to an Eskimo. He could sell reconciliation to the wife he had evicted. He pushed through the tables, ignoring the stairs. Elena was descending the stairs from the stage, flanked by security and Henderson. "Elena!" Mark called out, his voice too loud in the posh ballroom. The crowd parted. People turned to watch. It was a train wreck in slow motion. Elena stopped. She turned to face him. Henderson stepped forward to block Mark, but Eleanor raised a hand, stopping him. "Let him come," she said quietly. Mark stumbled up to her. Up close, she looked even more radiant and more distant. She looked like a stranger. "Elena," Mark panted, putting on his best charming smile, though it twitched at the corners. "Honey, that was quite a speech. Why didn't you tell me? We could have run this together." The audacity of the statement made a few people nearby gasp. Elena looked at him with mild curiosity, as if he were a bug she had found on her shoe. "Run it together? Mark, yesterday you told me I wasn't polished enough to attend this party." "I was stressed." Mark laughed nervously, reaching for her hand. She pulled it back sharply. "Baby, you know how it is. The pressure. I was trying to protect you from this shark tank. I didn't know you owned the tank." "You kicked me out of our home, Mark," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly. "You gave me $10,000 and told me to go to Ohio. You told me I didn't fit your narrative." Mark felt the eyes of the board of directors boring into him. He felt the weight of his career disintegrating. "I made a mistake," Mark pleaded. "I was confused. Jessica, she gave me bad advice. It was a lapse in judgment. But we can fix it. I'm your husband. I love you." Elena laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "You loved the idea of a servant, Mark, and now you love the idea of a billionaire. You never loved me." She signaled to Henderson. "Arthur, do we have the paperwork ready?" "Yes, ma'am," Henderson said, pulling a familiar-looking manila envelope from his jacket pocket. Mark froze. It looked exactly like the divorce papers he had given her. "What is this?" Mark asked. "Termination papers," Elena said simply. "For you and for Ms. Thorne." "You can't do that!" Jessica screamed from the table, losing all composure. She marched over, her face red. "You can't fire us. We are the top performers in this division. This is a lawsuit waiting to happen." Eleanor turned her gaze to Jessica. "Ms. Thorne, I've reviewed your expense accounts, and your client interactions, and your influence on my husband. Vance & Co. has a strict code of conduct regarding ethics. You've broken about 12 of them." Eleanor took the envelope from Henderson and shoved it into Mark's chest. "You wanted to be a power player, Mark. You wanted to make big moves. Well, here is your big move. You're fired, effective immediately. Your company car has already been towed from the lot. Your company credit cards are cancelled, and security will escort you out of the building. Elena, please." Mark fell to his knees. The humiliation was total. "Don't do this. I have nothing. I have the mortgage, the payments." Elena looked down at him. Her expression softened, but not with love, with pity. "You have the house, Mark, remember. You wanted the house. I hope you enjoy it. It's very quiet." She turned her back on him. "Security, please remove these trespassers. I have a company to run." Two large men in dark suits grabbed Mark by the arms. He struggled, shouting her name, but she didn't look back. She walked into the crowd of adoring executives, the emerald queen of the boardroom, leaving Mark dragging his feet on the red carpet, kicked out of the paradise he had sacrificed everything to enter. The sidewalk outside the Fairmont Hotel was cold, wet, and unforgiving. Mark stood there, shivering in his tuxedo, the rain plastering his hair to his forehead. He looked like a drowned rat in a designer suit. Beside him, Jessica was furiously typing on her phone. She hadn't looked at him since the security guards threw them out the side exit like common drunks. "Jessica," Mark stammered, his teeth chattering. "We need a plan. We can spin this. We can say we resigned in protest. We can go to Sterling Cooper or Bain. They've been trying to poach me for years." Jessica stopped typing. She slowly turned to face him, the streetlights reflected in her eyes, which were now devoid of any warmth or seduction. They were hard, calculating flint. "We?" She laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "There is no we, Mark. You're radioactive." "What are you talking about? We're a team. You said—" "I said a lot of things when I thought you were the golden boy of Vance & Co., Jessica snapped, hailing a passing taxi. "But now, you're the idiot who fired the owner of the company. You're the punchline of every corporate joke in Chicago by tomorrow morning. Do you think I'm going to let you drag me down?" "You were right there with me," Mark shouted, desperation clawing at his throat. "You told me to divorce her." "And you listened," Jessica sneered, opening the cab door. "That's on you. I'm a survivor, Mark. I'll find a way to land on my feet. You're done." She slammed the door. Mark watched the taxi speed away, splashing dirty puddle water onto his trousers. He was alone. The next morning, the reality of his situation hit with the force of a freight train. Mark drove to the Vance & Co. headquarters, functioning on 2 hours of sleep and a massive hangover. He convinced himself that maybe, just maybe, it had been a nightmare. Or a test. Maybe if he showed up, apologized and groveled, Elena would take him back. When he swiped his ID badge at the turnstile, the light flashed red. "Access denied." "Excuse me," Mark said to the guard, a man he had walked past for 5 years without ever learning his name. "There must be a glitch." The guard looked up. He didn't smile. "No glitch, Mr. Sterling. I have orders to collect your badge and hand over this box." He pointed to a cardboard box on the counter. Inside were a framed photo of him and Jessica, which he had foolishly kept on his desk, a stress ball, and his stapler. That was it. 5 years of 60-hour weeks reduced to a cardboard box. "You can't do this," Mark argued, his voice rising. "I need to see the chairman. I need to see Elena." "Ms. Vance is in a board meeting," the guard said, emphasizing the name Vance. "And she has updated the security protocols. If you don't leave, I have to call the police." Mark grabbed the box and walked out, his face burning with shame as former colleagues walked past him, averting their eyes. No one stopped to say goodbye. In the corporate world, failure is contagious, and Mark was patient zero. He went home to the empty house. The silence was deafening. He walked into the kitchen, expecting to smell roast chicken or hear Elena humming. There was nothing but the hum of the refrigerator. He sat down and opened his laptop. "Time to pivot," he told himself. "I'm Mark Sterling. I'm a closer." He spent the next week aggressively applying for jobs. He called headhunters he had snubbed in the past. He emailed contacts at rival firms. The response was universal. Silence. Finally, on a Thursday, he managed to get a lunch meeting with Greg Pinter, a VP at Highland Capital. Greg was an old drinking buddy. They met at a mid-range steakhouse, a step down from Mark's usual haunts. Mark ordered a scotch, trying to project confidence. "So, Greg," Mark said, leaning back, "you know the situation. Political upheaval at Vance. I decided to walk. I'm looking for a senior VP role. I can bring a lot of proprietary knowledge." Greg looked uncomfortable. He fiddled with his napkin. "Look, Mark, I agreed to meet you because we go back a ways. But I'm going to be honest with you. Please. You're blacklisted. Mark froze. What? It's not just that you got fired. Greg lowered his voice. It's how it happened. The story is everywhere. The husband from hell, who didn't know he was sleeping with the boss. It's viral on LinkedIn. It's a meme on Twitter. Mark felt sick. No one will touch you, Greg continued brutally. If I hire you, Vance & Co. pulls their business from our clearinghouse. Elena Vance is cleaning up the industry, Mark. She's consolidating power. And the word is out. Anyone who hires Mark Sterling is an enemy of the Vance empire. She's vindictive, Mark spat. She's doing this to spite me. Is she? Greg raised an eyebrow. Or is she just doing what you would have done? Protecting her brand? Greg threw a $20 bill on the table. Lunch is on me. Good luck, Mark. You're going to need it. Mark sat there for a long time after Greg left. He checked his bank account on his phone. Balance, $42,000. Mortgage payment due in 10 days, $4,800. Car lease, $900. Credit card debt, from the lifestyle he was maintaining, $15,000. He had maybe 3 months before he was destitute. He drove home in a daze. As he pulled into the driveway, he saw a for sale sign on the neighbor's lawn and had a sinking realization. He couldn't afford this house. He couldn't afford the heating bill. He walked inside and saw the divorce papers, the ones he had demanded, sitting on the coffee table where he had left them. She tricked me, Mark whispered, his shock turning into a twisted, ugly rage. She defrauded me. She hid her assets. That has to be illegal. He grabbed the phone. He wasn't going to go down quietly. If he was going to burn, he was going to take her down with him. Mark couldn't afford Goldman & Weiss anymore. He hired a lawyer named Saul Berkowitz, whose office was located above a Thai restaurant in a strip mall near the airport. Saul smelled faintly of pad Thai and cheap cologne, but he was cheap and aggressive. "We have a case," Saul said, leaning back in his creaky leather chair. "Fraud by omission. She didn't disclose her net worth during the marriage. That nullifies the separation agreement you signed." "Exactly," Mark said, feeling a spark of hope. "I want half of everything, half of Vance & Co." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Saul muttered, "but we can definitely squeeze her for alimony, spousal support, emotional distress." They filed the suit. Mark felt a surge of power. He was fighting back. 2 weeks later, the deposition was scheduled. It wasn't at a courthouse, but at the Vance & Co. legal offices. Mark walked in with Saul, wearing his best suit, though it now felt a little looser around the waist. He had lost 10 pounds from stress and a diet of instant noodles. The conference room was massive. On one side sat Mark and Saul. On the other side sat 5 lawyers from the most prestigious firm in the country, Cromwell & Sullivan. And in the center, at the head of the table, sat Elena. She looked different again. She was wearing a cream-colored business suit, her hair cut into a sharp, chic bob. She looked younger, lighter, and terrifyingly competent. She didn't look at Mark with anger. She looked at him with bored indifference. "Mr. Sterling," the lead lawyer, a man named Sterling, no relation, ironically, began. "You are suing for 50% of Ms. Vance's assets, claiming financial non-disclosure?" "That's right," Saul piped up, trying to sound authoritative. "My client was deceived." Elena's lawyer slid a single piece of paper across the table. "This is the pre-nuptial agreement signed 5 years ago." Mark blinked. "We didn't sign a prenup. We were broke." "Read paragraph 4, subsection B," the lawyer said calmly. Mark squinted at the document. It was his signature. He remembered signing it the day before the wedding. Elena had brought it to him, saying it was just some paperwork for the marriage license, and to keep their student debts separate. He hadn't even read it. He had been too busy watching a football game. Paragraph 4b. In the event of dissolution of marriage, both parties waive all rights to any assets acquired by the other party via inheritance, trust, or family estate, regardless of when said assets are revealed. You signed it. Elena spoke for the first time. Her voice was cool water. I wanted to protect you from my family's enemies, Mark, but my grandfather insisted I protect the company from you. He was a good judge of character. I didn't know what I was signing, Mark protested. You're a senior director of operations, Elena countered. Are you telling me you sign legal documents without reading them? That sounds like incompetence, Mark. Saul Berkowitz deflated next to him. Mark, if you signed this, we're dead in the water. Furthermore, Elena's lawyer continued, Ms. Vance is countersuing for the return of the $10,000 settlement check she received, as it was issued from a joint account that Mr. Sterling drained prior to the divorce, which is a violation of state marital asset laws. Mark felt the walls closing in. You can't do this. I'll lose the house. Elena looked at him. The house? You mean the one with the second mortgage you took out to buy that Porsche? The bank owns that house, Mark. You just pay rent to them. She stood up. The meeting was over. She hadn't even broken a sweat. Elena, Mark said, his voice trembling as she packed up her briefcase. Please, I'm drowning. I can't get a job. I'm going to lose everything. She paused at the door. For a second, he saw a flash of the old Elena, the woman who used to rub his back when he was stressed. You wanted a life of high stakes, Mark, she said softly. You hated the safety I offered you. You called it suffocating. Well, now you have room to breathe. Sink or swim. She walked out. Mark lost the house 3 months later. He sold the Porsche for a loss to pay off the legal fees. He moved into a studio apartment in a rough part of town. The wallpaper was peeling, and the radiator clanked all night. He got a job, finally. Not as a VP, not as a director. He was a shift manager at a logistics warehouse in the suburbs. He wore a neon yellow vest and checked clipboards. He made $18 an hour. It was humbling. It was grueling. And for the first time in his life, Mark had time to think. One rainy Tuesday, it always seemed to rain on Tuesdays, Mark was walking home from the bus stop. He passed a trendy art gallery in the River North district. He usually ignored them, but a poster in the window caught his eye. Elena Vance, The Invisible Collection, Opening Night Tonight. Mark stopped. He remembered the watercolors. He remembered mocking them. Childish, he had called them. He shouldn't go in. He knew he shouldn't. But his feet moved on their own. He was wearing his work clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt. He looked like the kind of person security would trail. But the gallery was crowded. He slipped inside. The walls were lined with breathtaking canvases. They weren't amateur watercolors. They were large, abstract oil paintings, violent, moody, and deeply emotional. They depicted storms, isolation, and towering glass structures that looked like prisons. They were beautiful. Mark looked at the price tags. $15,000. Sold $22,000. Sold $40,000. Sold exquisite, isn't it? Mark jumped. A woman in a velvet blazer was standing next to him, holding a glass of wine. The artist is fascinating, the woman said. They say she painted this entire collection while living in a loveless marriage, hiding her talent because her husband didn't approve. You can feel the repression in the brush strokes and the liberation in the new pieces. Mark felt like he had been punched in the gut. There she is, the woman pointed. Elena was across the room. She wasn't wearing a business suit. She was wearing a paint-splattered smock over a simple black dress, laughing with a group of people. She looked happy. genuinely, radiant happy. And standing next to her, holding her hand, was a man. He wasn't a suit. He was wearing a corduroy jacket and glasses. He looked like a professor. He looked kind. Mark watched as the man whispered something to Eleanor, and she threw her head back and laughed. It was a sound Mark hadn't heard in years. He realized then, with a clarity that cut deeper than any insult, that he hadn't just lost a fortune. He hadn't just lost a CEO. He had lost a woman who had a universe inside her, and he had been too busy looking at himself in the mirror to notice. He wanted to go to her. He wanted to scream. He wanted to beg. But he looked down at his dirty work boots. Then he looked at her smiling face. He wasn't part of her narrative anymore. He was just a footnote, a cautionary tale. Mark turned around and walked out of the gallery, back into the rain. As he walked to the bus stop, his phone buzzed. It was a notification from LinkedIn. Jessica Thorne has updated her profile. New position, senior consultant at Vance & Co. Mark stopped walking. He stared at the screen. Jessica, the woman who had convinced him to leave Elena. The woman who had dumped him on the sidewalk. She was back at Vance. How? He tapped on the profile. There was a post from Jessica. Grateful for second chances. Thank you to Elena Vance for allowing me to prove my loyalty and assist in the new transition. Sometimes you have to cut the dead weight to fly. Mark dropped the phone. It cracked on the pavement. She had sold him out. She had probably gone to Elena the next day, begged for forgiveness, and offered up Mark as the scapegoat. And Elena, in her terrifying pragmatism, had accepted. Mark stood in the rain, laughing. It started as a chuckle and turned into a manic, sobbing laugh. He had kicked his wife out to climb the ladder. And now, the two women he had betrayed were at the top, and he was at the bottom, looking up at the glass tower he used to work in. 5 years later, Mark Sterling was a ghost in the city he once thought he would rule. He had left Chicago for a quiet life in Wisconsin, trading his tailored suits for flannel shirts and his corner office for a desk at a family-run hardware supply company. He wasn't rich, but for the first time in his life, he slept through the night. He had even met someone, Sarah, a schoolteacher who loved him for his kindness, not his job title. But the past has a funny way of checking in. On a rare trip back to Chicago for a supply conference, Mark ducked into a dim bar on the Miracle Mile to escape the rain. He froze when he saw the woman in the corner booth. It was Jessica Thorne. She looked expensive, Chanel suit, Hermes bag, but her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow. She was drinking alone in the middle of the day. "Jessica?" Mark asked, approaching cautiously. She looked up, a bitter smile twisting her lips. "Well, if it isn't the martyr. I see you survived." "I did," Mark said. "I see you're back at Vance & Co. You won." "Won?" Jessica let out a dry, hacking laugh. "Elena hired me back, Mark. She made me the VP of Ethics Compliance. My entire job is to fire people who act exactly like I used to. It's her little joke. I sit in a glass office, making millions, and I am completely miserable. I can't quit because of the non-compete she made me sign. I'm in a golden cage and she holds the key." Mark looked at her with pity. Elena hadn't destroyed Jessica. She had given Jessica exactly what she wanted, and let it rot her from the inside out. "I have to go," Mark said, backing away. "Take care, Jessica." "Run along, peasant," she whispered, turning back to her martini. Mark walked to Millennium Park to clear his head before his train. Near the famous bean sculpture, he saw a commotion. Security guards were holding back paparazzi. In the center of the circle sat Elena. She wasn't wearing a power suit. She was in a soft sundress, laughing as a toddler, a little girl with dark curls, smeared ice cream on her nose. Beside her sat the artist Mark had seen at the gallery years ago, looking at Elena with pure adoration. She looked radiant. She looked like a mother. She looked happy. Suddenly, Elena looked up, her eyes locked with Mark's across the crowd. Time stood still. Mark waited for the anger, the coldness she had shown him in the boardroom. But it didn't come. Elena simply looked at him, at his rough hands, his calm face, and gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. "I see you," it said. "I see that you finally grew up." Mark nodded back, touched the brim of his cap, and turned away. He walked to the train station, dialing Sarah's number. "Hey," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm coming home. Put the kettle on?" "Always," she replied, as the train pulled away, watching the glass towers fade into the distance. Mark smiled. He had lost $1 billion fortune, but as he thought of the simple, honest life waiting for him, he realized he was finally the richest man in the world. Mark Sterling spent years climbing a ladder, only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. Elena Vance used her power not to destroy, but to reveal the truth. In the end, everyone got exactly what they deserved. Jessica got her golden cage, Elena got her true love, and Mark got a second chance at being a human being. It makes you wonder, if you were handed a divorce paper worth $1 billion, would you sign it? Or would you have noticed the treasure you already had at home? If this story gave you chills, hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel. What do you think? Did Mark deserve a happy ending, or should he have suffered more? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more stories about karma, betrayal, and the twisted reality of the rich and powerful, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you step on while you are climbing up, because you might meet them on your way back down. See you in the next story.